Texas Monthly.
After decades of searching, Captain Ronald Wayne Forrester was finally accounted for. Now it was time for him to go home. Ron embarked on his final flight on October 4th, Karoni's 54th birthday. He flew from Honolulu to Baltimore with a layover in Detroit, in the cargo hold of a Delta Airlines commercial flight. He didn't fly alone. A deceased Marine is always accompanied by a Marine of higher rank. Above him, seated in the cabin, was a stern-looking major in dress blues, which must have been quite a sight to all the passengers returning from a tropical vacation. As Ron's flight was approaching, I was in a parking lot right outside the airport fence with about 50 others. Karoni was there, with her husband Chris, Don and his wife, and Joseph Mortati, the guy who'd pieced together the flight path of Tiny 05. They were joined by a motley assortment who'd come to honor Ron. There was a color guard from the TSA, a few jacketed FBI agents, several of Karoni's friends, and about 20 old guys in biker vests. They represented the Patriot Guard Riders, mostly veterans who attend military funerals, and Run for the Wall, a cross-country ride to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington that Karoni has joined a few times over the years.
Hey Judy, it's Josh. Yeah, I remember we met in February.
This is Sam of Lillian Road all the way across country.
Hi, Josh. Yeah, nice to meet you. Yeah. Awesome.
Run for the Wall Central, and we got Central there, and then we got another Run for the Wall Southern route there.
Wow.
We all got in our cars, the bikers fired up their motorcycles, and we caravanned past the security gate. I was in the backseat of a sedan with 3 others, including Joseph.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if this was ever going to happen. And we put so much work into trying to figure out what happened. We had like most of the puzzle pieces, but we couldn't be absolutely sure.
Our procession rolled up to a terminal gate. We all got out and milled around, waiting for the plane to arrive. We must have been a strange sight out there, 50 people standing around on the tarmac. Above us, I could see travelers in the terminal pressing up against the window, trying to figure it out.
Hey, it's landing. It's clear to land.
After a few minutes, I spotted it.
There's a Delta flight approaching here.
Color guard. Top team. Jump. Color guard. Freeze it. Off.
As the plane approached the gate, 2 fire trucks, parked on either side, shot water into the air from their cannons, creating an arc as the plane passed underneath.
We're opening something in the belly of the plane so that they can, they're going into the cargo here.
An official beckoned Karoni and her family closer to the plane.
On behalf of the federal government, we're all here for you today. We appreciate you being here very much. You're not alone, obviously.
Right this way, Major. And Captain.
On a conveyor belt, the casket emerged from the cargo hold, draped in an American flag. Above us, in the windows of the plane, I could see passengers filming it all with their phones. In the terminal, the windows were now even more crowded with onlookers. Among them were a few older men, standing at attention. Karoni was wiping tears away. Don hadn't made the trip to Hawaii, so this was his first reunion with Ron in over 50 years. He laid his hands over his twin brother's casket and cried. Later on, everyone gathered up at a funeral home, and I found Don there.
Don, I gotta ask, and it's okay if you'd rather not, but when you walked up to the casket, and with all of you, what was that?
It was very emotional.
Yeah.
But it really brought home the reality that he's home. We have the certainty that he's been on the other side of eternity for almost 52 years. And it's of great comfort. We can now rest in peace.
Rest in peace. I heard those words a lot on this trip, usually meant for the dead, not the living. I've thought a lot about how Don put it, that now he and his family would be able to rest in peace. It's one of those little phrases we use to do a lot of heavy lifting, words that gesture at something deeper and more complex than we're able to convey. A little later, Don asked me, I think he meant it rhetorically,
How do you put words to any of this?
and I joked with him.
That's going to be my job.
Okay.
I wish you well.
Because I'd been wondering the same thing. From Texas Monthly, I'm Josh Alvarez, and this is the final flight of Captain Forrester. This is our last episode, episode 5, The Final Flight. Hanging in the basement of the house where I grew up, my parents had this drawing, in pencil, of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. It showed an older man, a veteran, resting his hand against the wall, and reflected back in the surface were the ghostly figures of 3 of his buddies, looking gaunt in their green fatigues. It always felt a little random. Neither of my parents had served. They were both immigrants to this country. When I asked them about the picture, they didn't have a straightforward reason for having it. Something about the memorial made them feel more connected to the country they chose to build their lives in. I know it imbued in me an early sense of patriotism. Years later, I lived in Washington, and I'd visit the wall regularly. It felt to me like a uniquely American memorial. Unlike so many war memorials I've seen in other parts of the world, flamboyant statues of a singular hero, or some grim-faced avatar of the people, this was a complete list of individuals, each person made equal, regardless of rank or class or race or religion. You stand there and you just feel the weight of each soul. Extraordinary efforts to not only honor the dead, but to bring them back home, date at least as far back as the ancient Greeks. Athenian warriors brought the bones of their fallen comrades back to Athens and placed them inside cypress coffins, which were held aloft on platforms and paraded through the city before being buried in the sepulchre dedicated to those killed in war. In the procession would be one empty platform without a coffin, in honor of those whose bodies could not be recovered. Early in U.S. history, there were uneven efforts to account for fallen service members. In 1865, Clara Barton, a Union Army nurse who went on to found the Red Cross, opened the Missing Soldiers Office in Washington at the end of the war. She and a small team of clerks accounted for 20,000 missing Union soldiers. After World War I and II, the U.S. Army worked on accounting for missing servicemen. But it wasn't until Vietnam that accounting for all missing servicemen became a matter of widespread public concern. Why was it the Vietnam War versus other wars where this became, at the forefront? Like, why wasn't this raised in the Korean War
Well, you're asking what you think is a simple question, but it's not. It was very complicated, yeah.
It's a question Jay has spent time with.
Thanks for that, Joshua. Yeah.
Jay said the recovery mission after World War II was simpler than Vietnam. The United States defeated Germany and Japan, so after the war, the U.S. still had access to the battlefields. In the Korean War, though, some servicemen did go missing, in places the U.S. couldn't access after the war.
Now, it wasn't tremendous numbers, but there were questions. Guys whose pictures appeared in Korean or Chinese media who never came back. And there was some efforts after the war, Korean War, to identify these guys.
Jay gave me 3 reasons why Vietnam was different. Why this time Americans were so much more interested in finding MIAs. First, by the end of the war, Americans trusted the government less.
Much more intense questions being asked about what the government knew and government policy.
Second, during the war, missing and imprisoned Americans had been used for widespread propaganda.
And you're fighting this communist enemy whose known policy was to use American POWs and their information and their remains against us.
And third,
and you had even more people who were clearly identified as being alive, who never came home, and the Vietnamese completely stonewalled us.
put it together, And you get a nation that for the first time was demanding the government prove what happened to the missing. And to this day, a group of family members are keeping those demands alive.
The advocacy group, the League, which had formed in May of 1970, which had initially been formed to press for accountability, for improved treatment, suddenly now morphed into an organization that is pressing the American government to get answers on all these guys and what happened to them.
And in fact, Jay said the League's influence went beyond that.
The League changed how the world looks at post-war recovery, not just America. The Kuwaitis, after the Gulf War, had a bunch of people who suddenly went MIA that they had to go find. The Ukrainians have reached out to DPA. Hey, how do you guys create a government agency to look for our MIAs post-war? The Vietnamese themselves have suddenly decided to go back and look for their own, quote, martyrs, unquote. There's this tsunami around the world of other countries suddenly taking a totally different cultural look at this.
In Vietnam, I visited the largest national cemetery dedicated to the war. It's in a beautiful, hilly park with tall trees, just 30 miles south of where Ron and Jim were found. The cemetery holds 10,000 graves. I noticed a group of about 100 graves are sectioned off, facing a different direction, each of them with a headstone bearing the same inscription. Here lie the remains of an unidentified martyr. There are cemeteries like this one throughout the country, and the graves at this cemetery represent the tiny fraction of the Vietnamese who were killed, more than 1 million, and who are still unaccounted for, estimated between 300 and 500,000. An estimated 250,000 people from the South Vietnamese side were killed or are presumed dead. No government has an estimate for how many are still unaccounted for, and no government is looking for them. 1,573 Americans are still missing from the war in Southeast Asia. 99 are Texans. You've heard how complicated and expensive it is to recover them. And suddenly, we're in a moment when nothing seems safe from cost cutting in the name of government efficiency. There are real questions in parts of the MIA community about whether President Trump will decide that this mission is worth the cost.
Well, when you hear the rhetoric about everything that's going to be stripped out to save $2 trillion, what is going to be cut when you look at the defense budget, and when you are considering, again, rhetoric of suckers and losers, are we going to invest in finding them?
This particular conversation was just a week after election night, but there was already a sense of what was coming.
And so, while I'm grateful selfishly that I got an answer when I did, I hope I'm not the last one. And I do have concerns about that.
Karoni is worried about the future of the mission, not just because of the money it takes, but because it depends so much on working with other nations.
Our accounting work in the field is done in the host countries that require us to have relationships with those countries for us to take our technology, for us to take our manpower, for us to be digging around, not in international waters, but actually on their shore.
In years past, if a president started having second thoughts, he could count on a visit from the League. They were the ones keeping the pressure on. Now, though, the League is in a complicated place too. A few years ago, Karoni and other board members had a falling out with its longtime director. Karoni thought the League wasn't doing enough to modernize. She thought the group was stuck in the 80s, and that its aging leadership wasn't receptive to ideas from Karoni and members from her generation. Karoni resigned from the board in 2021. I reached out to the League's executive director, but she declined my request for an interview. Today, Karoni isn't part of the League, but she's looking for ways to keep supporting MIA families, like hers.
I could explain it to you all day. You're never going to know exactly what it felt like to be this little kid that I was. But I can talk to another MIA daughter who lost her dad when she was 2, and she knows what that felt like, right? So I do think it's important that we find one another and help support each other. Last year, the family update in D.C., there were 50 brand new families that had been their first time to go to one of the meetings, and that just really struck me. And how do we support those folks?
The League isn't the only organization that advocates for POW MIA families, but it's the oldest one, and the one that's probably had the greatest influence on policy.
And I am very grateful for the additional family I made, being part of the League of Families, what we were all able to learn from each other. And I am extremely grateful to the women who started the organization back before Daddy was ever missing.
Hey listeners, it's Aisling Ayers with Texas Monthly. Spring is all about fresh air, sunshine, and good food. After a busy weekend, there's nothing better than a HelloFresh box waiting at my doorstep. I'm looking forward to some delicious protein-rich options, like the crispy panko sesame chicken and the saucy pork burrito bowls. Please help us thank HelloFresh for supporting the final flight of Captain Forrester. Go to hellofresh.com/flight10fm right now to get 10 free meals with a free item for life. Every HelloFresh meal uses high-quality ingredients, including seasonal fresh produce and proteins that travel from the farm to your doorstep. And the deliveries are flexible. You can pause or skip when you need. Meet your health and money-saving goals this spring with HelloFresh. Feel great with meals that fit your spring schedule and make the season even more delicious. Go to hellofresh.com/flight10fm right now to get 10 free meals with a free item for life. 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only, varies by plan.
In 1973, Richard Nixon promised the government would deliver the fullest possible accounting of MIAs in Vietnam. But who decides what's possible? I talked with Merle about this too.
It's impossible to find all the people that are missing, okay? It's just physically impossible, I am convinced. There's no way that they're going to clear all of them. Because there certainly are a lot of cases that the Vietnamese don't know about, okay? For instance, there are guys that were being extracted by helicopter and fell off the rope, okay? Somebody goes down in water that's 3,000 feet deep. How are you going to find them? Okay, you cannot find somebody like that.
Quang Binh happens to be where the worst tragedy in the history of the accounting mission took place. A helicopter carrying 16 investigators, a joint team of Americans and Vietnamese, crashed into a mountainside in bad weather, killing everyone on board. In the aftermath, there were questions about the high cost of the recovery mission, not just in dollars, but in lives. John McCain, the senator who'd been shot down and imprisoned for 5 years in Vietnam, speculated that, quote, at some point, sooner rather than later, the Pentagon would end the mission. That was 24 years ago. Even when remains are found, there are always going to be unanswered questions. That's true for Ron Forrester, too.
It comes back to this one lingering mystery because at least as so far as these documents from the Vietnamese seem to show, Ron Forrester was buried somewhere, or some parts of him were. And then it was exhumed, and then buried again, and then exhumed again, and then taken
somewhere and lost.
Vu, the veteran from Quang Binh I spoke to, told me he'd buried the remains of an American serviceman. He didn't know who it was. But Vietnamese records, mentioned in the first report Karoni saw in the 90s, do mention a grave for a Ronald Wayne Forrester. Jay had looked into all of this.
Do you believe that they're actually lost?
That was a question we never could answer because, I mean, at this point now you're talking about motivations and a bunch of other stuff. It's a possibility, but to me there was equal possibility that they had either at the local level deliberately kept them or hid them or done something to them. My personal opinion was that because this was a plane shot down at the end of the war and was a, quote, 700th airplane, et cetera, that this was a bit of a war trophy for them. Mm-hmm. And there was certainly some bad feelings in that village about Americans. A couple of times American teams went out there and there was this guy who came out screaming at them.
Indeed, the scrub sheets sent to Karoni mentioned a villager who brandished a machete and screamed at American investigators, though the reports don't mention why he did so. Those reports also mention other witnesses and government officials who were hostile to American investigators. But most of the witnesses were at least willing to talk. Many tried to help, but nobody could say what became of the remains found just after the crash.
But they could very well have lost him. They could have also been stolen by somebody, a remains trader who was trying to do some stuff. So there's all kinds of possibilities.
This is why Jay wanted DPAA to do more research before sending in a dig team. He believes those Vietnamese records could tell a more complete story about what happened to Ron's remains.
They know exactly what happened, where the plane crashed, where they found this guy. And so the DPAA, again, is going back to this rice paddy, digging based upon witness statements, and maybe they were good witness statements, but again, they are winging it, and thank God they found him.
Even after the DPAA's excavations, it seems likely that rice paddy in Vietnam is, in a way, an unmarked grave.
And so here's the thing. We know there's more, right? But the thing is, that little small bone fragment held the answer.
The casket that made that flight from Hawaii was mostly empty. Just one piece of a hand or a foot that we know had been Ron's. One piece that represents something almost incomprehensible in its significance to Ron's family. A few times, Karoni told me there's something fundamental about the accounting mission that MIA families feel deeply, that's hard to explain to anyone else. The word I heard people use most often was closure. From the outside, it's tough to imagine what closure really means. You still grieve your missing father, brother, or husband. So what comfort is closure? I think one answer might be in a story Karoni told me, from her childhood, when her family did not have closure. Her mom had remarried when Karoni was 4. Karoni grew up with her stepdad and 2 stepbrothers. Her stepdad coached her in Little League, but at the same time, there was a sort of distance. She could feel it as a kid, but she didn't understand it.
One of my stepbrothers said something super powerful at my stepfather's funeral a few years ago, that my stepdad, wish he had told me he loved me more. He was trying to give me a home and a family with my stepbrothers. But he was also saving that space in case Dad came home. People didn't talk about that stuff back then or maybe even realize what that was. But it's got to be hard to let yourself completely embrace a child when you've got to leave space for their real father to come back. And we've talked about the Rambos and the missing in action movies and, people are alive, people are coming home. Well, that possibility impacted more than just me and Dad's family. It impacted this new other family that my mom had been working to build.
Today, though, Karoni and her family have felt the difference it makes to know.
People saying, I'm so glad you have closure. And when someone says that, I really appreciate the sentiment. And I don't want to jump right in and say, I don't know that I believe in closure. This past weekend, I got to go watch the Aggies beat the hell out of LSU with Class 69, Animal 8, all the guys that Daddy was in the Corps with. And he would have loved to have been there. So, closure doesn't mean like the loss is gone. I have an answer. And because of that, I have some peace knowing what happened to him.
Here's Ron's brother, Larry.
You don't know what a great weight you had on you until it's removed.
And Ron's twin brother, Don.
I have a background in social work and, worked with families in crisis for as long as I can remember. And much of what I know about grief, I've just learned from my own experience. But I do think that at every developmental point and place, you re-experience grief. And I guess part of what I discovered on the tarmac as the casket was coming out is it was almost as though the 52-year period almost just evaporated. And it was really current.
And that brings me back to what Vu, the Vietnamese veteran, demonstrated to me: decency. It is decent for Americans to mandate that our government provide answers for all MIA families. Decency is what we owe each other, and what we can most readily give in ways big and small.
I do believe families need one another, and I encourage veterans, in their local areas, find out if you've got MIA families that live in your communities. Do you have anyone locally that you could help support? Just saying, we care. How can we support you? How can we help honor your loved one?
During our last interview in the studio, Karoni told me about a message she'd gotten recently from a stranger who found her on Facebook.
I'm going to read it to you.
Oh, yeah.
Give me 5 seconds.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You might even cry.
All right. Yeah.
I dare you. I know, that's a look you just gave me.
You're already crying.
My husband and I were on Delta Flight 1546 from Detroit to Baltimore, sitting next to your father's escort, unaware of the tragic story unfolding. I felt compelled to reach out and share that the entire plane was enveloped in silence, with tears in our eyes as we processed the weight of it all. Only later did we learn about your father's incredible bravery and the closure it brought to your family. We want you to know that our hearts are with you during this time. I also noticed 2 monarch butterflies fluttering nearby, a beautiful reminder of hope. We're truly happy for you and your family as you find peace. And not only did I reply, I just very much thanked this person for seeking me out, but also just the human kindness and I think a lot of us sometimes will get an idea of, oh, that'd be nice to do. But this person took the time to find me and send me this note. And human kindness, we need to celebrate it.
But the story doesn't end with Ron's final flight. It ends where this story began.
The appropriate response is howdy. Howdy. So today we finally lay Captain Ron Forrester to rest here in the hallowed ground, Arlington National Cemetery.
A few days after her father's remains arrived from Hawaii, Karoni was standing behind a podium on stage. We were in a community center on the military base right outside Arlington. Behind her was a screen showing a slideshow of Ron. Several wreaths were laid in front of the stage. The 200 seats were filled with family and friends from every part of Karoni's life. Aggies, MIA activists, Run for the Wall bikers, DPAA officials including Bob Maves, and some members of the DIG team, plus the director of the agency. Jay and Joseph were there too. After stressing about her speech all weekend, pulling together thoughts and memories of this mission she'd been on since she was big enough to dial her grandparents' telephone, Karoni wrote every word of it that morning.
Back in 1978, most MIAs from the Vietnam War were declared dead unless the family could prove otherwise. And so we found ourselves here at Arlington to have a funeral service and place a memorial marker on a hill. As a child, it was very confusing to me. But this is what a funeral for Ron Forrester should look like. Friday, we welcomed Dad home when he arrived in Baltimore. It was also my 54th birthday. It was an answer to all those blow-out-the-candle wishes of a lifetime. And I'll tell you that what I was most not prepared for was Friday night at dinner.
A little birthday dessert came out with a candle, and I was caught up in how happy I was to be with my family and friends that day until it came time to blow out the candle, and I froze. Lillian from across the table in her sweet voice said, "Mom, pick a new wish now."
It was a warm, almost cloudless day, and I was standing on a gently sloping expanse of grass, among seemingly endless rows of white marble headstones. A gentle breeze flowed through the tops of towering oak trees. The Marine Band is marching along the roadway just about they're about 150 yards from me. That's about 80 to 100 people. The Marine Band is in red, and then there's a color guard, I guess, behind them. Just rifles in the air. It's really an amazing sight. As the procession approached, a pair of Ospreys, the planes with helicopter-like propellers, roared overhead, a flyby organized by the Marines.
Greetings to you all. We're gathered at Arlington National Cemetery, a sacred place. A place where for 160 years we have honored our nation's fallen warriors and patriots. It is the final resting place for almost 500,000.
The casket lay next to the grave, surrounded by dozens of Marines in dress blues. Karoni and her family sat beside the grave, with their friends and loved ones behind them. It's a scene that has played out here thousands of times, including once before for Ron. Except this time, the casket that had been absent all those years ago was actually there. Under the flag the Marines held outstretched and then carefully folded for Karoni.
As you look on the rows of headstones, each stone is a brick in the foundation of freedom upon which we stand. And today, Captain Ronald W. Forrester, at long last, takes his rightful place on these hallowed grounds.
And it's not the first time I've been presented a flag, but it's the first time that it mattered to me. The first time I felt like it was meaningful to be given that flag.
But what struck me more than Ron being there was the community that stood behind Karoni. There were 200 people, almost none of whom had ever met Ron. And yet all their lives were connected to him, mostly because of his daughter. It was the happiest funeral I've ever witnessed.
I've had multiple people that maybe I haven't talked to in some time. It's like, I don't know whether to say, I'm sorry for your loss or congratulations. And I said, well, it's really both. Because it is the true essence of bittersweet. One of my best buds from college had come in town for it, and he walks into the funeral, and we go to embrace, and he's like, this is crazy shit. Because it is for so many people that have been on my life's journey with me. You know, there were times it was like, you're not letting go when others would. And when my friends would have accepted if I thought it was time to give it up. And yeah, some people flat out thought I was crazy for trying, right? I mean, I think it's still very surreal too that, hey, we pulled this off. It is some crazy shit.
After Ron's burial service, I went back to the wall. And this monument that I'd grown up looking at for all those years in my parents' basement, this time I came to see it in a whole new way. It was a mild fall evening, and the light was fading. Karoni was there with her family, Chris and Lillian, and a few friends. In a week rich with ceremony, one remained. For years, Karoni and her friends had worn bracelets with Ron's name and the date he went missing. They'd vowed never to take them off until Ron came home. Now they would take them off, break them, and leave them here, at the foot of the wall, underneath Ron's name. We were standing in front of the middle of the memorial, where the last Americans killed in the war are listed. Lillian was pointing out the symbols next to their names.
Basically, here, let me move so
Yeah, sure.
you can see the light. So here you see a cross in front of Thomas. Thomas is missing. Here he came home, he was killed in action.
Most have a little diamond etched into the stone. A few, 1,300 out of more than 58,000 names, have a cross, meaning that they're missing.
But with Grandpa right there, they keep the cross, but they fill in just the middle so you know he was missing, but his remains were recovered, he was found.
Okay. So yeah, if it's a fine little cross, then yeah, that's an MIA.
Yeah.
But if it's
filled in partially,
filled
but it
in.
will never be a perfect diamond because
Right.
it always has that kind of star looking to it. You can see a lot of these actually look. A few of those look like they were mended.
Amazing.
Right? It's beautiful, like to understand what you're really looking at and be able to look at all of these people. It's pretty beautiful.
It is. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
heartbreaking and beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the trick with the wall. You can stand back and let the immensity of the thing overwhelm you. All these dead kids and young fathers. How many volunteered? How many hated the war but showed up anyway, rather than dodge the draft, so the burden wouldn't fall on someone else? And all the sons and daughters, now twice the age of their dead fathers, who grew up without them. Or you can come closer. Let one name catch your eye and notice the imperfect diamond. This mark has a story to tell, about a family in pain and searching, about the dozens of people who helped them, and about a kid from West Texas who dreamed of being a pilot, and how he finally made it home.
These things are strong.
Whoa. Okay.
Break silver? Do we have a saw?
Can we buy one? Someone quick run. I need help.
A hard head would probably break it.
All right.
After breaking their bracelets, Karoni and her family took off. But I hung back. They'd left behind a poster with a black and white photograph of Ron. It had the dates of when he went missing, when his remains were identified, and when he was buried. Today's date, October 7th. It was easy to miss in the dark, so I turned on the flashlight on my phone, I pointed it at the poster, and waited. It was chilly now, and I wasn't sure for how much longer people would be out here. But I wanted to see them notice the poster as they passed, to see them put a face to one of the 58,000 names, see them recognize how present the past still is. You see some people's reactions. Some people are just quiet. Some people just quietly shake their head. I don't think a lot of people realize that it's the date of it being today. But maybe if more people show up, I'll point it out to them. Maybe it was the feeling I'd had that night, realizing that this monument I'd always seen as something immense and permanent was actually a living document. It could change. It had changed just today. I wanted these strangers to realize that too. I'd been out there for about an hour when a guided tour approached, and something remarkable happened.
All right, that's that way. All right, let's keep an eye on it. Hold on, Bill. So here's a case. Look at this. This is something. So you have here a person that, look at that, was missing in action with the U.S. Marine Corps, December of '72, and they identified his remains way later in 2023, and he's buried in Arlington today. Is that today?
That is
Yeah.
today. And where was he from?
Odessa, Texas.
Wow.
That was a long time to have to wait. It was a long time for the family.
Boy, special day for this young man and his family.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? It's been that long. I cannot believe it. So I'm old.
I'm just glad he's home.
Yeah.
And his family knows where he is.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Welcome home, sir.
Welcome home.
How many names are on your grave? How many names are in this one block?
We had production help on this episode from Robert Frazier. This is Josh Alvarez. I'd like to thank the people who made this story possible. I'd like to thank Don and Larry for trusting me with sharing their stories about their brother. Thank you to Bob Maves, members of the DIG team, and other officials at the DPAA who granted me access to the work they did and are still doing. I'd also like to thank Jay Veit, Joseph Mortati, Merle Pribanow, and Lou Schwetzer for sharing their knowledge and passion in helping Karoni and families like hers. And a very special thanks to my colleagues at Texas Monthly for making this story possible. Our editor-in-chief, Ross McCammon, who first tipped me off to this story and said yes when I came back to him asking for more time and more space to tell this story. Editor Mark Warren, who pushed me to turn a good magazine story into a great one. Story editor J.K. Nickel, who shaped a lot of material into a compelling podcast series. Ella Kopakin for her archival research and sharp editorial eye. Producer Patrick Michaels, who translated my dense prose into a beautiful script and shepherded this project from start to finish. And sound engineer and musician Brian Standifer for helping me hit the right notes and crafting the original music that elevates the story to heights I couldn't have imagined. Finally, and most importantly, thank you to Karoni for the countless hours she spent with me telling and retelling her amazing story, and for her generosity and trust, without which no one else would have spoken to me for this story. Thank you for listening. Thanks for listening, and if you don't want to wait for the next episode, sign up for a Texas Monthly audio subscription to hear it right now. You'll also get bonus episodes that'll take you deeper into the story, and unlimited access to everything at texasmonthly.com. Visit texasmonthly.com/audio.